Listeners, Organauts, you're just in time for a podcast. Off the Rails podcast, in fact. I'm the offrailgamer, and I'll be talking at you for the next 20 minutes or so. It's definitely December, folks, and you've tuned in to episode 43 of Off the Rails, a fortnightly video game podcast that goes out on Spotify, Amazon Music, Castbox, and YouTube every other Thursday. Now, it occurs to me that our next podcast will go up on Boxing Day, so I suppose we ought to get festive today, if that's okay with you. So, I'll ask you a question then. Are you hanging up your stocking on the wall? You can let me know by writing in to offrailgamer@gmail.com, which brings me on to the next topic of conversation. We have a semi-regular segment on the show called Listeners' Whispers, and if you write in to the aforementioned email address, refrain from being mean, and keep your message clean, I just might read it out in the next podcast. I will say, I don't want to put anyone off listening today, so I won't be covering anything overly celebrating any particular holiday. Instead, I think we'll just talk about some winter games. Winter warmers, we'll call them. Cozy games to play when it's cold outside. But we're getting massively ahead of ourselves, as that's concerned for the main part of the show that we'll be getting to in about 5 to 10 minutes' time. With that said, we can now move on to the part of the show that I call What I've Been Playing Recently. It's the part of the show in which I talk about the games I've been playing recently. Close to 2 weeks ago, I uploaded a video to YouTube for the first time since Season of Scare. That's not because I was recovering from the chills of Season of Scare, but simply because I had failed to find the time to make any content. Anyway, I got to it at last on 30th of November, when we had a look at a PS1 title I had only just picked up, and the title in question was Ballistic. Now, if like me you haven't heard of Ballistic before, I can tell you in one word what it's like. Zoomer. Yes, the puzzle game in which the frog fires coloured balls at coloured balls spiralling around it to clear them before they reach the end of the track. The only difference is, in Ballistic, you're some sort of artillery rather than a frog. So, how did I come to learn of this game's existence? Honestly, I was just browsing eBay, and I'm not sure what made me click on it, as the front cover art is pretty unassuming. But then I saw it was effectively Zoomer on PlayStation, and I just had to get it. And my verdict? Well, I really enjoyed it. I kept the episode to around 10 minutes because I imagine it gets pretty repetitive as a spectacle after a while, but it's a totally chill experience and I will be spending a lot more time with it off-channel. You can pick it up for a pretty reasonable price, and if you're looking to bulk out your PS1 collection and enjoy puzzle games, I definitely recommend Ballistic. Having played a bit of Tomb Raider on the Evercade during my trip abroad, mentioned in the last podcast, I stuck on the remasters and jumped into Tomb Raider 2. I have to say I'm pretty terrible at it at the moment, but I'm loving the nostalgia I get from it, and I'm having a blast trying to get good, as we know the young people like to say to those of us that aren't instantly good at games they've sunk more than 1,000 hours into. Darn kids, get out of my yard! And I'll mention this now because it's not particularly news anymore, and I don't have a link backing it up, but I hear Tomb Raider Chronicles Last Revelation and another one, maybe Angel of Darkness, are getting the remake treatment next. And I know I keep banging on about how I'm sick to the back teeth of keep getting remakes, but this might be another one I pick up when it drops. At the weekend just gone, I uploaded more PS1 content to YouTube, this time playing through just the first level of Kirikou, a game based on a French movie, so I guess we could include it if we ever return to the movie tie-ins topic we covered a few episodes back. Now, I'd never heard of Kirikou before. neither the film nor the game. Mechanically, it put me in mind of Pandemonium, only because it's a running platformer. If you've not come across Pandemonium either, I did play that game on YouTube back in September, so you don't have to scroll back far to find it. Kirikou is an odd game. It seems you're playing as a newborn baby who can talk, and is very capable, running, jumping, and even fashioning spears to smite enemies with. The premise is that an evil sorceress has stolen all the water, I think, and Kirikou's father and uncles have all gone to challenge her, but she has eaten all but one of Kirikou's uncles, so you set off to find and help your uncle. It's a peculiar little title, which is kind of fun to play, but I just don't entirely know how comfortable I am with it, as Kirikou runs around in the buff the entire time. Anyway, having never come across it before, I felt it ought to be documented rather than lost forever. But yeah, odd game. Before that though, I did a little live stream on TikTok playing some of the games I've recently picked up. We had a look at Exhumed, in which you go to the Koronak Valley in Egypt to investigate recent alien activity and missing research groups. It's sort of a Doom clone, being a first-person shooter, but I think it's a little disingenuous to call it that. Needless to say, I got stuck fairly early on, so changed up the game. Next, we looked at Guardian's Crusade, a turn-based RPG, a little like Final Fantasy VII to look at, but it definitely does its own thing. And I was almost put in mind of Dark Cloud, even though Dark Cloud isn't a turn-based game. I'm usually awful at turn-based RPGs, but I found myself really getting into Guardian's Crusade, and I think it's one I'd like to stream a full playthrough of at some point, if I can get through it offline first, that is. I want to make sure we'd actually get to the end, if I did stream it. We then had a look at Molten Menace, which I'd never heard of before the Yorkshire Gamer posted a video of it a few weeks back. It's a Fisher-Price game suitable for ages 3+, so it might not pose a significant challenge to a veteran gamer such as myself, but it's still nice to have in my collection nonetheless. Then I stuck on Wacky Races, which certainly isn't the worst kart racer going, and I finished the stream with some more Ballistic. But, having spoken about that game at the start of this segment, I guess we can get moving on swiftly. Hi offrailgamer, seems you've gone all cinephile on us the last couple of weeks. Just checking you're still into gaming, lol. There are so many movie tie-ins from back in the day, going back to episode 41, but have you come across any of the knockoff titles before, like Lion and the King? I imagine you will have done. It'd be fun to see you play that sometime. I did love the Lord of the Rings Two Towers game when I was younger. I always played as Aragorn myself. I wonder if anyone completed it with Gimli. He was a little tank, but I always felt he was the highest difficulty setting. I do also think you need to post a video on that Asterix movie tie-in game you were talking about. I'd love to see how bad it is, but you certainly haven't sold me on seeking out a copy to play for myself. Anyway, that's all really, so bye I guess. Gemma. Who we all know is Gemma from South Shields there. Nice to hear from you again, and thank you for writing in. I fear I may have oversold how bad Asterix and Obelix Take on Caesar is. It's not horrendous. It's just deeply disappointing, honestly. Nonetheless, I will make a video of it for YouTube, perhaps in the new year. It's funny you should mention Lion and the King, as this is a game I'm planning to play on the channel soon. I was going to do a mini-series of knockoffs, including Lion and the King, Son of the Lion King, Cinderella, and Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys. I also have a game called Nice Cats, which I haven't had a chance to play yet, but it looks like it might be a knockoff of Disney's Aristocats. We will be looking at these games on the channel in the new year at some point, so stay tuned for those, and we'll find out how truly bad they are. Now, Organauts, perhaps you'd like to get involved in the next Listener's Whispers, and I'd certainly encourage you to. It's nice to hear from you, honestly. All you have to do is send an email to offrailgamer@gmail.com and keep it clean and not too mean. The email address is in the podcast episode description to make it easy for you. Right, Hollywood season is over as we looked at movie tie-in games and straight-up movies in the last two episodes. But Off the Rails is meant to be about video games, so let's get back to our roots, shall we? Here in Blighty, and indeed across the Northern Hemisphere, it is winter, so I figured I'd talk about some lovely wintry games that are perfect to curl up indoors with when it's fiercely cold out of doors. There will be one or two Christmas games in this list today, but as I said at the top of the show, I will try to keep the holidays content to a minimum and focus on what makes these good to play when the days are shorter. I will also say that I'm not deliberately compiling a list of cozy games today, as we've already done that in a previous episode or two. These are just games that, well, they're wintry. Look, let's get started and hopefully it'll all start to make sense. Or maybe it won't. Anyway, here's a list of games. I'm going to start things off with PS1's The Grinch. Now, many of you will know The Grinch as the Dr. Seuss character who stole Christmas, and as such, you may be up in arms right now, bellowing things like, "Oh, I thought you said this wasn't going to be a list of Christmas games." To which I say, please just listen, hear me out. That's not all this list is about. Though this first game's Christmassy, I promise you they won't all be. Anyway, in PS1's The Grinch, you play as the Grinch himself, or sometimes as his dog Max. Being set at the time of year that it is, the backdrop for this game is a lovely winter wonderland, all snowy, everyone wrapped up against the cold in their anoraks and mittens. And oh, I maybe shouldn't be telling you this, but it's occurred to me that there's a second reason this game choice could make you mad. I'm pretty sure it's a tie-in game for the Jim Carrey movie, after I told you we were done with the silver screen in the intro as well. I played The Grinch over on YouTube almost 2 years ago now, and I've forgotten many of the shenanigans we got up to with it. But it was great fun, and probably deserves a revisit at some point. Possibly not before we look at last year's game release, The Grinch Christmas Adventures, though. Now, I feel like I haven't really said much about this first game, but given how riled up it got you all, I guess we should press on to the next one. And for this one, I want to stay with the PS1, but get a little sporty. And it's not what you think. I know I've talked about Capcom's Trick-and Snowboarder more than once on the podcast, so today I'm actually going to talk about Ski Air Mix instead. And if you didn't guess from the title, it's a skiing game. I streamed a bit of Ski Air Mix a while back, but I think it may have been on TikTok, so there's probably not any evidence of it anymore. That said, although it took me a while to get the hang of it, it did end up proving to be quite good fun. So it's likely to be one I'll have to get up on YouTube at some point. I don't think there were a huge number of different courses to race on, at least initially, but maybe you can unlock more. Saying that, I seem to recall the courses that are available from the off providing a good amount of variance and offering up a good challenge too. From memory, I think you can hit the slopes, as I understand is the professional term preferred by skiers, in Japan, Sweden and Italy. I would expect it's likely you can also choose a course in France and the USA or Canada as well, but honestly, my memory fails me with regards to this game, so I guess we should talk of another. And this one isn't itself particularly Christmassy or wintry in terms of actual gameplay. In fact, there's going to be 3 like this in today's lecture, whereby they all have a wintry association for me because I first played them at Christmas. And the first such game is Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil, which I only actually had a demo for that came with my PS2. Of course, there were other game demos on the disc. You could play a friendly match of This Is Football 2000, for example. But I was taken in by the 2 playable levels from Klonoa 2, being one of the surfing levels, but also the Sea of Tears. Now, the Sea of Tears level is set against a dark, probably night time backdrop, and has an ambient music that I find reminiscent of the sort of music they play in aquariums. Needless to say, for me, it all builds a wintry vibe, and I love to shut myself in on cold days and play this lovely cozy game. I was thrilled a few years ago when I was able to add Lunatea's Veil to my game collection and experience it in full at last. I also grabbed up the Fantasy Reverie series remake of the first two games, Door to Phantomville and Lunatea's Veil. If you've never played Klonoa, I can't sing its praises highly enough. But perhaps let's look to another game in itself more fitting for this time of year. We're getting a bit old school now as we power on the Sega Mega Drive to talk about Days Before Christmas. This is absolutely the most Christmassy game I'm going to talk about today, and then we can get back to wintry stroke other, I promise. In Days Before Christmas you play as Santa. Mechanically it's a pretty standard classic platformer, just with a festive aesthetic. Each level is a new day in December, so if it would have had save states, you could have played this like a video game advent calendar. You platform your way through levels trying to avoid taking damage from enemies. I think you can attack them, but I can't remember if jolly old St. Nick swings his sack at them or if he pelts them with snowballs. There are also boss fights, as you might expect, and you'll first go up against a giant snowman on the side of a mountain, and later a mechanical roly boy. One level that I did find quite surprising was when you, Santa, find yourself in the sewers. You must evade the rats and spiders and other beasties, but also this level is somewhat timed, as you must rush to the end of the level while the water level is rising. And that's honestly one of the things this game does nicely, is it does change up the level designs so it's not just a rinse and repeat experience throughout. The other thing to mention is that there's a pickup you can find in each level that will turn you into a bad Santa. Not the bad Santa portrayed by Billy Bob Thornton in the film, but nonetheless you will shed your hood, grow some little horns out of your forehead, and get more aggressive. Thankfully the change is only temporary, I think lasting around half a minute or so, which is good because I find it actually easier playing as regular Santa, and I think this is also where my earlier confusion around attacks stemmed from. I think good Santa throws snowballs, and bad Santa wields his sack as a kosh. Every year in Animal Crossing New Horizons, the island residents celebrate Toy Day and exchange gifts with one another. In all honesty, that part isn't much different from every other day of the year, as they're always gifting one another things. It's very sweet, really. But during the winter months, your island will be covered under a blanket of snow, and in the snow you can find snowballs that you can roll around to make bigger and bigger, and then you can stack these balls up to 3 high to make a snowman. But the challenge comes in getting each ball the right size to make your snowman the perfect proportions. Do so, and I think your snowman will reward you with something. I don't really talk about Animal Crossing nearly enough, but it is a lovely game and perfect to sit and chill with through the winter. I'll talk about another strange game now, but one that I always associate with this time of year, and it is Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the PlayStation 2. I spent the latter half of my school winter holidays with this game when it released, shutting myself away, playing through the galactic conquest, battling it out on planets like Geonosis and Megiddo. But what was also cool with this game was that it introduced space battles, a feature that had not been present in the first game. And what excited me most about this as a kid was having the opportunity to pilot an X-Wing fighter craft. You could fly an X-Wing on the Naboo Plains level in the first game if you reach it quickly, but honestly the experience in SWB2 was significantly improved. Let's talk some Atari, if I may. Now, you know how much I love these old cartridge games, even though I have only been collecting since March this year. But I became an instant fan of the system, having enjoyed playing some titles on a plug-and-play joystick in my teens. The game I want to talk about specifically is called Frostbite, in which your goal is to build an igloo. The game plays a little bit like Frogger, as the ice blocks you need to collect are floating in the water. You must hop to the bottom of the screen and then back to the top to retrieve your building materials and craft your home before you freeze, meaning there is a timed element to all this. Along the way, you'll also want to avoid the birds flying, not exactly overhead, but that will fly smack into your face and knock you into the water, spelling game over. Get your igloo built to finish a level and receive your score before advancing to a new level to do it all over again. The joy, as I always say with Atari, is that these games compel you to have one more try to see if you can set a new high score, and as such I can see myself playing a lot of Frostbite this winter. Next up is a game, well, a DLC in fact, that I haven't actually played yet. Back in 2022, I played through Lake on YouTube. It's a very nice game in which you play as Meredith Weiss, returning to her hometown of Providence Oaks to fill in for her father and deliver mail around the area she grew up. It's a really gentle title, and I honestly can't sing its praises highly enough, though I appreciate it won't exactly be everyone's cup of tea. What I'm yet to play is the Lake DLC, Season's Greetings. Now, my plan is to stream both the base game and the DLC in the next couple of weeks, so we'll be able to share the experience together. But without wanting to turn this segment into an advert for a stream I haven't actually scheduled yet, I'll just say it will be over on TikTok, so make sure you've got your notifications on and I'll hopefully see you there. It's hockey season, by which I mean ice hockey, of course, and I can think of no better way of celebrating, other than watching, or even better, attending a game if you get the opportunity, than by playing some NHL on home console. And for me, I want to hark back to NHL 15, in fact. But why should I pick out a nearly 10-year-old game? No, scratch that. It was released in September 2014, making it 10 years old already? So why should I want to pick out a 10-year-old game when the series releases a new one every year? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because it's the game that really got me back into the franchise. You see, growing up I had NHL Breakaway 98 on the PS1, and I kinda liked it. In 2014 though, I decided to pick up a modern ice hockey game. I'd started following the Toronto Maple Leafs that season, and it got me hankering to play. And the reason I selected NHL 15 for this list is because it's the title that I stayed up way past my bedtime with, playing into the small and not so small hours of the morning. It was the closest I'd come to pulling an all-night gaming session since I was a student, and that in itself made me feel a deep connection with this game, like it was some kind of game disc fountain of youth. All that being said, of course, any NHL game will be perfect to sit down with through the winter months, but for me, I have a real bond with 15. Its soundtrack also consists of many of the songs that were playing on the radio when I'd visited the GTA, or Greater Toronto Area, that same year, and that really was a trip of a lifetime. But for the observant among you, you'll have noticed I still have one more game that's not strictly seasonal that I want to talk about, and this one is both the furthest from seasonal in the list, but also the most risque seems too trivial a term for it. I believe it was Christmas 2007 that I opened Rockstar's Manhunt. Now, it was unfortunate that my PS2 gave up the will before I could finish playing, but I nonetheless got a good few hours in playing this game. You play as a man who's being hunted. Blocks of the city have been shut off from the outside world, and there are gangs all looking for you, and all looking to kill you. Only the hunted becomes the hunter. You stick to the shadows, luring enemies to you by whistling in the dark. If you had the PS2 headset, you could even attract their attention with your own voice. Best not be screaming at all the jump scares then. The controls for Manhunt are pretty simple. Pretty much anything you find lying around can be used as a weapon, including plastic carrier bags. You sneak up behind your enemies, and it's just square to attack. I think there are 3 attack animations for each weapon, with a light attack if you just press the square button, and they get progressively more brutal the longer you hold the square button down for. As I say, I never got to finish Manhunt when I was younger, but given it's, in my opinion, the right time of year, I should probably crack it out again and see how I get on with it these 17 years later. And there we have it, folks. A list of games has been talked about. Now, if you are celebrating this year, I hope you have fun, and if you're not celebrating anything this winter, I hope you stay warm and get to do something fun anyway. This has been Off the Rails. You've been a terrific audience, and I'll catch you again in 2 weeks' time. Bye then.